D, and this is Wiki Kernel versus Nekoblakii. This has been, of course, a trend-setting match throughout each and every one of these. I'm interested in seeing precisely how these are going to be going down this week. First week, Wiki Kernel blew us out of the water, hopping in from fellow tamers and 2-0ing Nekoblakii. Nekoblakii definitely turned things around in the second week, but if all of the fellow tamers players, I've said it before and I'll say it again, Wiki Kernel is really something else and is definitely worth looking at when it comes to a lot of what we're seeing. So, right, this particular match is going to be pretty interesting to look at inside that, primarily because of all of the things that we've seen here. Like, Exotic French, Nekoblakii is, of course, a fantastic player, and as I previously said, they've got a lot to look at. Since this is a new week, this does also mean that both of our contestants can be swapping up their teams, which is something that could be very interesting to see as well. We know that Nekoblakii has tended to favor more aggressive lineups in the most recent time, tending to bounce between sort of slightly more aggressive demi-mid-range sort of things where it's like, you know, you've got a Kinu in there, but you've got a lot of potentially aggro options, to suddenly a much more amphitheater-oriented sort of high aggression lineup. With that, we're just going to see if both of our contestants are in-game. It looks like we're just waiting for both of them to invite right now. As you can see right there, you'll also notice that right after this, we have another matchup that I'm very interested in seeing from Group D. That would be Srizen versus Wiki Kernel. Srizen is definitely, I think, one of the most aggressive people in Group D, bringing the Hedgen, the Chromion, all sorts of terrifying threats, Tireless Mashuk, very capable of plowing through opposing teams when they're not ready or prepared for it. So that will be coming up in roughly an hour and a half after this match, but in the meantime, I'm interested in seeing precisely how Wiki Kernel and Nekoblakii face off against each other. If you're curious about standings, don't forget to click the little doodad that shows you that inside there. We should have that as a command that's immediately available if you type !standings. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'll make sure to provide a link in the description that will give you access to our standings for this tournament. Thank you once again, everybody who's paying attention in the meantime. We'll just be waiting just a hot minute for Wiki Kernel and Nekoblakii to get in. Oh, never mind, they're in. So, looking at this, Nekoblakii once again, Nekoblakii's bringing the heat this time. We see the Amphitheater, we see the Luma Tolkien and the Luma Barnshee, we see Oshiara, we see what's most likely another Chamomile Gallus. We do tend to see a lot of mirroring Gallus as of late. Wiki Kernel's Kinu has been banned. We do see Yowler, Firekoish, Mimit, Golzi, and Hedgens. This is I'm pretty sure this is the team that we've seen from Wiki Kernel last week. So, not too much of a change up from either of our contestants. The question then is, have they changed their spreads perhaps, or anything else in order to keep their opponents on their toes? So, first ban of Kinu and a first pick of Mashuk all seems pretty reasonable there. We do see Wiki Kernel go for the very unorthodox first pick of Mimit. This basically means that anything else that Nekoblakii picks in the second slot there will be taken by Wiki Kernel. If this is the Valish, then, you know, one other thing this does for Wiki is, like, it gives you a bit of scouting, obviously, into this. I like the concept of Nekoblakii picking a Volfi here. Even though it's slightly disadvantageous into this lineup, you can then basically just force a... I don't know if forcing a dab out is necessarily the best way here. Tolkien could be good, but no, we do see the Valish. The Valish, of course, still being a very powerful setup sweeper, or an immediate, like, sort of from position 1 charger into the room with its physical and special versatility. We see a lot of physical and special Valish lately. This does mean that we do see a Tolkien ban. This makes a lot of sense. Wiki Kernel is not going to appreciate those fire resists on Nekoblakii's side, since honestly the Hedgen and the Firekoish are looking very powerful into a lot of the back, well, basically everything not named Mashuk, which explains the Firekoish ban out of Nekoblakii right there. We do, of course, still have the Hedgen, which alongside the Mimit could very well prove to be quite a powerful presence into this. I think Tireless Mashuk, if that is still a Tireless Mashuk, is another obvious thing we can see here. I'm curious as to whether this Golzi is going to be able to assert enough pressure inside this early game. It tends to be a bit vulnerable, not having priority, and if this is a special Valish, that could be kind of nightmarish and force a swap, because a Crystal Spikes is not what you want to be taking as an electric type. We do see the Barnshee and the Volphy get picked up at the end there, alongside the Mashuk from Wiki Kernel as previously suggested. Looking at this, once again, I actually do like the Valish, and that is what Wiki Kernel goes for. If I recall correctly, he tends to run a pretty aggressive one. With that, we will be getting into our game one. Best of luck to both of our contestants, and we'll see how they wind up going. So, first things first, we do see the Valish gets copied out there. So, right. I don't, in hindsight, necessarily enjoy the Golzi on this board. I think it's kind of in a hard spot. We could still see just like an uppercut, and then depending on whether this is a physical or special Valish, either a base jump or Crystal Spikes back into Nekoblakii's Valish, which would be frightening, but it really depends on whether Golzi can survive this opening salvo. If this is a Wastewater and a Crystal Spikes going into this Golzi, that could be pretty grim. We do have a lot of swap-ins on Nekoblakii. Okay, Nekoblakii doesn't have a swap-in for both uppercut and Crystal Spikes outside of Gallus. Gallus isn't a bad swap-in for that, and it would still provide sharp stabs or Crystal Bite support into the Golzi, or a hook kick into this Mimid if it's still desperate on pretending to be a Valish. Obviously, the Mashuk is still a concern there on Nekoblakii's side into the following turns, because while it definitely is going to want to prioritize setting up a Wastewater, like a second one in order to get the Tireless off, if this is still a Tireless Mashuk, which makes sense on this team. We see a load of aggro threats on Nekoblakii's team. You look at that, you're likely to see an aggressive Mashuk. But in the meantime, though, we do see Golzi bounce out for Hedgen, which is much more capable of eating that opening Crystal Spike, if that's what we're expecting here. It looks like Wiki Kernel got the information that he needed from that scout right there, as the Crystal Spikes does come down directly into the Hedgen, eating that like a champ, not taking, actually managing to only go under 50% from the poison tick, as we do see the Crystal Spikes Wastewater come out there. So Mashuk coming in on this side as well suggests that he's pretty comfortable just throwing like a uppercut microwaves perhaps, or alternately like a Hellfire Wastewater or Hellfire Uppercut. Any of those are pretty reasonable as combinations of moves into the Valish spot. My main question is, what are you expecting to swap in there? Obviously, a Valish doesn't want to stay in on this field. A Gallus, if that's a mirroring Chamomile Gallus, might come in, but that's still kind of risky. But that might be better at weathering these attacks than, ironically, the Barnshee, which, while it definitely loves tearing apart that Mashuk, it doesn't want to take a Wastewater or a Hellfire to the face. The combination of the two, it's got good base special defense, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily want to eat both of those. Although it would be valuable for it to get the hold up to scare away this Mashuk. In the meantime, this Mashuk kind of wants to click Wastewater again, but obviously that's not the best move here. I think it's almost better to see the P-Jab or something like that come out, but nah, the more I think about it, P-Jab doesn't make sense there. If you wanted P-Jab, you would want the immediate double up, on, especially on aggressive tools like this, unless you're just targeting the Mashuk. But we see a lot more special damage rather than physical. We actually see both of Nekoblakii's Tems stay in as the Golzi swaps in on the Mashuk side. Potentially attempting to bait out the Barnshee there, but since Nekoblakii stayed in, we're going to see no such thing, as in fact the Golzi does still eat the Crystal Spikes, and that's probably going to be a Wastewater too. Wiki Kernel tried to play fast and loose here, but played directly into Mashuk's hands and Nekoblakii's. As a matter of fact, it still even goes onto the Hedgen, which was not able to take a +1 Wastewater. So we see a very familiar board out of Wiki Kernel here. It's got roughly 75.6 less health on the Golzi right there. But you know what? We take those, I guess. Sorry, 85.4. That's the one. I can do maths, honest. But yeah, no, this Golzi doesn't want to be there. It hops out. Valish hops in instead, and yeah, no, this is flying by, as instead we are going to see him try to, like, just eat some more attacks that are looking to potentially finish off, without using an extensive amount of stamina, this Golzi. But at the same time, Nekoblakii is just one step ahead every single step of the way. We do still see the uppercut come down and take down the Valish, but now the Gallus is in, and that's a hook kick, staring this Valish in the face. Definitely not something that you want to see. We could reasonably expect to see the Mashuk return to the field here, actually. We'll notice that as a Strange Vest Mashuk, a very interesting thing to see. Double screen on Golzi. I mean, it saved it. If that double screen wasn't there, we likely would have seen a KO from those Crystal Spikes, or something very close to it. We do see the Banshee hit the field, glorious and resplendent in its Luma form. And, right, so the basic game plan that I'm seeing here is, like, this is Nekoblakii calling Wiki Kernel's bluff here. It's like, do you want to Crystal Spikes my Banshee? Can you afford to? Are you going to make that trade when you've got a barely living Golzi in the back and I have a full health Volfi and Mashuk? So, the Crystal Spikes, if this Valish stays in, definitely takes down this Banshee. No, it's bait. Nekoblakii does actually swap out, keeping the Mashuk there instead. So, it looks like, in turn, Wiki Kernel took the bait, clicked the green circle, and the hook kick will still be coming down like a ton of bricks. The Wastewater does come down into that spot as well, but that hook kick one-shots that Valish, which was always the secondary threat on this board. With that, we will see Mimit hit the board instead, as that will be transforming into another Mashuk. This is an awkward thing to give Wiki Kernel, but you do have a full health Banshee in the back, so honestly, I don't think this is a bad board for Nekoblakii to go for. You still are taking a lot of damage from those Mashuks, even if you get a free swap in with Banshee, but it could still work. My other concern here is if these are, okay, if this is a max speed Mimit and this is a max speed Mashuk, Mashuk and Mimit actually outspeed Banshee by 1, so you really need Prio to confirm that matchup. It can be ever so slightly awkward inside there, just that one extra base speed on Mashuk really making the difference. But we do see a cage come down, excluding, of course, the Mirroring Gallus, which takes nothing from this. And the H-Slap does smash into this Mashuk. It's going to take it out. This followed, of course, by the perfect jab onto the Gallus means that things are quickly escalating into sort of a late game scenario here. But honestly, I look at this and I much prefer the board from Nekoblakii, provided, and only provided, she can actually throw enough pressure into one of these Mimits before it actually goes down, like to ensure that it actually goes down. My concern here is, I don't know if there's enough prio on this board to appropriately do that. The hook kick isn't going to hit well enough into this Mimit. The Crystal Bite only did down to 57%. If this Banshee can get the Hypoxia off before either of these Mimits, then this game is Nekoblakii's. If not, if both of these Mimits wastewater this Banshee and take it out, then that's what we call a horrible time, and Nekoblakii's really on the back foot there. 3 melee types is not what you want a Gallus and a Volfi in the back trying to deal with. Gallus can knife fight them, but it doesn't feel great. We do see the sharp stabs come down on the other Mashuk, as the Banshee does outspeed. Worth noting that the speed arrow was Nekoblakii's there, as the Hypoxia does kick in with the Aloe Vera. 1 wastewater goes in, but that's not enough. The neutrality Banshee is able to weather this blow, and with that, it does look like things are tilting firmly into Nekoblakii's side of the field there. A barely alive Golzi and a Mimit that was still able to do over 50% of this Banshee will not be able to clean up the rest of this game when we still have a full health Gallus willing to overexert this turn to potentially get 1 more KO, and a Banshee with hold now, so it's got Tornado. This is looking like it's going to clean itself up literally this turn. And that's precisely what we see. As the Mimit gets smacked by this Tornado, it will just immediately, we see how fast that health bar goes down. As in the meantime there, we do see the Charged Iron Filings. It goes down, and it does nullify the Gallus there and take out the Banshee, but that is a bit late, as we will note that the Gallus does take it out. Worth noting there as well, though, that this Golzi outsped this Gallus, so that says something about the speed of this Golzi as we go in to our next game. In the meantime, though, well played to Nekoblakii. Definitely a powerful match there from both of our contestants. I feel like Wiki Kernel definitely had some outlets there. We saw them double back on the tireless Mashuk before. It's been very valuable for them. So I'm pleased to see them like sort of leverage similar win conditions here. The Gulzi eating that hard swap really hurt them into the late game. If that Gulzi had more HP, then I feel like that would have been a very different game. But attempting to mind game Nekoblakii into like getting the Gulzi out for the Barnshi there when Nekoblakii was more than willing to leave that Barnshi in the back just felt a bit rough for Wiki Kernel in that sort of early game. Still though, these are the sorts of back and forths that we have to be accustomed to as we get into this. So, as we continue, we'll just be waiting for our contestants to enter their second game in our best of 2 here. So that is 1 point for Nekoblakii. If Nekoblakii takes out Wiki Kernel in this next game, then we will see, of course, 3 points to Nekoblakii going into our standings. If, of course, Wiki Kernel is able to bring this back, then we will see 1 point to both, as is standard in our tie system. So, with that, we'll just be waiting a quick moment for our contestants to get into their next game, just identifying whether they either need a break, whether either of them need a break. And with that, it looks like they don't need a break, and we'll just be a moment as they're getting into their next match. Gotta say, banning the Tolkien out worked out very well for Wiki Kernel, but I am concerned about, like, okay, I feel like getting the Mimit on the first game was wise just to get intel on the Valish, like, that still worked out. Okay, we're getting into our second game, so we'll see whether that winds up being as valuable in the next one. So, looking into this, we've come in just in time for our first bans. We see that Osiara immediately leave the field. We see, of course, Wiki Kernel's Kinu. Constant permaban from Nekoblakii there. A lot easier to deal with Wiki Kernel's team if it does not have that Kinu. So, this all makes perfect sense in terms of that. An important thing to consider in the meantime is what else are we going to see out of this first pick, since Wiki Kernel does have the first. We do see the Firequash. Firequash was, of course, really powerful into Nekoblakii. It's why it was the second ban. Mashuk is a very good answer to Firequash. Firequash cannot take a single wastewater from our Shroomy boy, and it certainly isn't going to want to deal with that. My other concern here is what's the second thing that we get here on Wiki Kernel's side that would attend to that appropriately? A Valish would make this a strong opener into the Amphitheater if you're just hitting that slot as hard as possible. You'd want to ban out the Tolkien if you do that, but then you're still really only getting one attack in on the Firequash. We do see him go for that, though. I was kind of wondering if we would see the Hedgen in there instead, just because that's a bit better into the Mashuk. We've seen Mashuks do so much into these games, but in the meantime, we will start seeing our second bans come out there. I will anticipate, because of this combo, a ban of Tolkien, which is just the best defensive pivot into this lead on Nekoblakii's side. One thing we could see on Nekoblakii's side, however, is potentially banning out their Mashuk, which is still very threatening into this board, and didn't get first picked. Like, if we see a Mashuk swap turn 1 into either of these spots, the spot that you're expecting the wastewater to go into, then that's a problem. Instead, we do see the Gulzi ban. Also still valuable, given the fact that literally everything in Nekoblakii's back line doesn't like hitting, it doesn't like getting hit by Gulzi. Even Gallus isn't particularly fond of it. Obviously, the Mashuk would have still been powerful there, but we do see Nekoblakii's comfortable with the Barnshi in the back of being able to deal with that. We do see the Mimit get picked up alongside the Volfi for Nekoblakii, and the Hedgen Mashuk combo for Wiki Kernel, leaving as counter pick Nekoblakii's last choice. So, looking at this board once again, we do see the Gallus does feel a lot more comfortable into this. That's exactly what Nekoblakii picks. That Chamomile being very powerful into the Hellfire if it gets going, just due to the fact that you resist the burn. You may take a ton of damage from that, but you're built to withstand those, and you're built to smack it back with 40% chip as we get into our second game of our best of 2. So, I've already anticipated that the best option that Wiki Kernel could be going for here is doubling into this Amphitheater, of which there are no defensive swap-ins for Quetzalcoatl. We've seen his Firequash hits particularly bloody hard. So, if we are anticipating that, then Nekoblakii might just want to stay in and plague it, which is exactly what we see. When you don't have any defensive swap-ins, it's a lot better just to stay in and dunk on your opponent and try to just whittle them down instead. We see the Amphitheater basically take one for the team as it gets down to 16% from the Crystal Spikes. The Quetzalcoatl coming in, doing more than enough to finish it, but the Wastewater will be enough to take out the Firequash. The Amphitheater will be the only thing that this lead takes down. And this is one of the problems with that. If you're getting counter-led like this, particularly hard, it can be pretty easy for your opponent to just sort of stop your momentum in the tracks. Now, that said, we could just see Mashuk or Valish here. I like either, Mashuk or Mimit turning into Valish here. Both of those feel pretty reasonable. I don't know if I'm 100% on the Valish Mimit train, just because that's basically inviting Volfi and Mashuk to T-pose on you. Hedgen might be better for Wiki Kernel to pick here. Or alternately the Mashuk, both of those seem pretty reasonable. Since Mashuk covers basically everything, Mashuk covers everything that would threaten the Valish, Valish covers everything that would threaten the Mashuk. As we can see, that is precisely what gets chosen, which is a good call given the fact that Nekoblakii does indeed pick up that Volfi. So Volfi into this board is another offensive plaguer. We've seen that the handcuffs is on the Amphitheater, so we won't be seeing those on this Volfi. It's likely a sweatband variant. We've seen many more of those as of late. So looking into this, we do see that this Valish is in a bit of trouble. I don't expect this Volfi to go down to sustained aggression this particular turn. So it's likely it's going to want to get out of dodge and maybe turn into a second Mashuk. If we see a Mimit hop into that spot, that's actually not bad for Wiki Kernel, because then you're eating the plague. You don't care particularly much about it. Yeah, no, we do see the Valish bounce. It does become the Mimit. And then we can still expect to see a Wastewater into the Volfi if it's trying to stay in, but no, Nekoblakii is going to hop out from that as we see the Gyalis come in instead, expecting perhaps a Crystal Spikes into that No, there's no way you expect a Crystal Spikes into that spot, but it does devour the Wastewaters as a defensive swap-in. So, with that, the uppercut smashes into the opposing Mimit, and it does very little into that. So, yeah. Gyalis doesn't exactly have free reign on this board, but it isn't exactly in any sort of bad position. If we're expecting, for instance, a perfect jab from the Mashuk, and then I believe Nekoblakii runs H-Slap, which would activate Tireless as well. That would be very powerful. We see both of those into real Mimit, then we would, into real Mashuk, then we would see like a Crystal Bite afterwards. That would feel very strong. Instead, we do see the Cage come down. Still very powerful move into this. It triggers the Tireless from Mashuk there. We do see the Wastewater come down, still into the Gyalis, seeing that damage start to ramp up there alongside the War Drum. The Perfect Jab comes down as well. Definitely, the Gyalis can take it, but it doesn't want to. Crystal Bite does make a bit of a mess of that real Mashuk there, taking it down to 57%. Was kind of expecting that Crystal Bite to happen this turn. Given these Mashuks are not parrier, it's a lot easier to hit them physically. You wind up getting a bit of returns for your investment there. It seems likely that Nekoblakii will just let this Gyalis die and sharp stabs into that spot, attempting to get value off of this, and that's precisely what we see as the sharp stabs comes in, rather than run the risk of anything else taking damage into the obvious doubling that we are seeing there as the Gyalis gets taken down to an uppercut. Mashuk going down to under 20% from that. The Wastewater smashing in on the Strange Vest Mashuk will not take it below 50%. It's still feeling fairly comfortable here, and it looks like it will be able to take out real Mashuk on Wiki Kernel's side from its own Wastewater. That is a hefty overexert, though, as it does go down to 30%. With this, Barnshee actually still feels pretty reasonable into this, because we still, of course, have the terror that is the Mashuk that is a Mimit on Wiki Kernel's side, which still has Doppel. We could see the Vulfi into that, however, just to like debate it out. We do see the Hedgen hop down on Wiki Kernel's side. This also seems pretty reasonable because you want to get the microwaves off. But no, we do see the Barnshee. The question is this bait? My problem is, I don't think this is bait. I think that Nekoblakii's confident that they outspeed. Otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing this, because there's no point defensively swapping into the Vulfi here, because then you're still just taking wastewater to the face. You don't want to take that. Same goes for the microwaves, which you also still don't want to take. So, at this point, Nekoblakii has to be confident that she can outspeed both of these and hit the Hypoxia particularly hard into Wiki Kernel. Now, I don't think that's unreasonable, and on top of that, we have a +3 Mashuk staring Wiki Kernel down that's going to be perfectly capable of uppercutting into this Hedgen. The problem is I don't think that outspeeds. We could potentially see a swap into Vulfi on that side, while we see Nekoblakii try to deal with Wiki Kernel's Hedgen, but honestly, I'm worried that the gotta go fast priority there might just is likely to take down this Mashuk and might take down this Barnshee even before all said and done. Unlikely, but we'll have to see. We did see that our Barnshee from Nekoblakii's side did outspeed during the speed excuse me, during the speed tie, and we'll have to see if that's the same thing, just due to our speed arrow being on Wiki Kernel's side as well. It's unlikely that that's going to be a thing there, but we'll have to see how that goes. So, with this, we're getting into our next turn, and the Mashuk does bounce out for the Vulfi, correctly assessing that the harmful microwaves will just destroy that Mashuk, but no, it is in fact a Plasma Beam onto the Barnshee instead, guaranteeing the KO if the Mimit outsped when Speed Arrow was on Wiki Kernel's side, but we do not see that, as instead, the Hypoxia still outspeeds the Mimit, as Nekoblakii maintains confidence over their spreads. So, going into our 6th turn here, and with that we have an undeniable advantage once again to Nekoblakii. Outspeeding that Mashuk there, well, in Mimit form, was deeply important to Nekoblakii's success this game. The second Plasma Beam is likely to take down the Hedgen, but at the same time, actually, no. What we're more likely to... Okay. A Plasma Beam onto the Vulfi might save both of these Tem's lives. That's actually looking a little better here, just due to the fact that, at this point, the Barnshee the Barnshee's probably dead to Crystal Spikes. I think you just let the Barnshee go down. Barnshee's done its job. Barnshee doesn't do well into either of these Tems. You can let it get one tornado off into something and go down, probably the Hedgen, at which point then, if you're like, Dust Vortexing the Valish, that doesn't feel particularly bad, but Wiki Kernel's probably going to want to make sure that that beam lands on the Vulfi, which is likely still going to be able to get moves off and doesn't go down to a double in from either of these two Tems. As anticipated, we do see the tornado. It goes down onto the Valish, focusing down that threat instead. We do see the Barnshee go down to the second Plasma Beam as the Crystal Spikes does go in onto the Vulfi instead. Unfortunate to see as the Sandstorm will actually pick off the Valish. Perhaps if there was a burn there, that Valish could have lived, but instead we do see it go down. The Reactive Vial is, however, triggered on the Hedgen. The Hedgen is still going to be, like, the Hedgen's still living here. It is definitely going to have to snipe this Mashuk once again, though. We need to see the Plasma Beam there this turn. It needs to be able to take the Dust Vortex coming out from this. But no, we see the Fire Tornado land into the Vulfi instead, meaning it is going to be taking a +3 attack from this Mashuk and a Plague. Very unfortunate to see, as the Wastewater, as a matter of fact, will be taking it down as Nekoblakii takes our second game between Wiki Kernel and Nekoblakii. Congratulations and well played to Nekoblakii in this, gaining 3 points against Wiki Kernel. Wiki Kernel really had Nekoblakii on the ropes there, as that last turn, I really feel like if there was just a slight change of focus there, then Nekoblakii would have had a nightmare trying to take it down, but it was still very rough with that Volphy at full HP, the Valish actually going down to the Sandstorm, just some very unfortunate bits of aggression at the very last end for Wiki Kernel from Nekoblakii. But that is what we are here to see, and that's precisely why Nekoblakii has maintained such a devastating and dominating position inside this game from alpha to now. She makes good calls, makes good reads, and continues to press with them, and we've seen that today. Don't worry, while I will be signing off right now, we will be back in roughly an hour to bear witness to Srizen versus Wiki Kernel. Another very fun matchup with this charming player from Velotamers that I've been very pleased to see. And of course, some more greatest hits from Exotic French. Srizen, of course, another Exotic French member. Both of these players have been pretty fantastic to see. So don't worry. It should be a really fun match, and I look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, though, I've been Quarter, and I hope that you all have a fantastic day.